Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm Vladimir Solokhub. We're currently at Odesa Security Forum, and joining me now to talk about information security is Senior Fellow at Legatum Institute in London, Mr. Peter Pomerantsev. Mr. Pomerantsev, welcome to Ukraine Today.
Hi, how are you doing?
All good. Mr. Pomerantsev, first of all, thank you for finding the time to talk to us. You, as the expert on information warfare, information war, propaganda, can you tell us about, can we talk a bit about information security and how do you assess the efforts of the Ukrainian government to protect itself against the massive information campaign which is being staged by Russia?
Well, I think it's a very problematic term, information security. There's another one that gets bandied about here a lot, information sovereignty. I'm very suspicious of these concepts. There are legal mechanisms which exist across the world for banning incitements of violence, hate speech. And one can use those mechanisms to stop the broadcasting of channels which do that. It's not about information security, it's just about legislation which exists. Different countries have different regulators, so with different legal backgrounds. So in America, there's hardly any regulation of media. In Germany, there's a lot. I mean, if you ever say anything about, promoting Nazis, in Germany, you get in a lot of trouble. The British have Ofcom, which regulates that broadcasters aren't allowed to use a certain, aren't allowed to be very biased or inaccurate. So all these things exist. I think once we stray into this idea of information security, we're on a very slippery road to authoritarianism. So I'd be very, very cautious about these ideas. Ukraine is under military attack. When you're under military attack, when part of your territory has been annexed, when you've been invaded, you are, I think, fairly legitimately, you can make a very strong case for banning the broadcasters of the country that's invaded you. And that's not particularly new.
But banning the broadcasters is something which is a reactive. Yeah. What about the proactive steps? Do you think that the government of Ukraine is doing enough proactive steps to promote its message, to take part in this information war, if it does anything at all, in your opinion? I mean, you probably know more than I do about the details of what they're doing. I think you have to sort of step back and look at the bigger picture. Well, we would like you to have your thought from the perspective of someone who observes it as the outsider.
Look, I think there's a lot of confusion around different elements going on here. When you're talking about the government, that's got very little to do with sort of information in the country. There's, the governments need to articulate its positions, communicate with its own people, communicate with the outside world through public diplomacy, strategic communication. And from what I understand, the Ukrainian government is learning very slowly about how you do that. A lot of countries are learning very slowly. It's a very difficult challenge in an information age. But that's got nothing to do with sort of the quality of media in the country, which is down to the system of media ownership, which in Ukraine is famously in sort of beholden to oligarchical interests. So that's not, I don't really see what, the government of Ukraine has got to do with that, really. What they could do is try to nurture a strong public broadcaster, which would create sort of a fair and balanced media channel in the country. But, which was a tragedy that didn't happen in 1991. But I think maybe the underlying issue is actually not just about Ukraine. We live in such a fractured media environment. We see the same problem in the US, where people live in little media bubbles, where even if you had perfect government strategic communications, the government was clearly saying what it thought, and you had a strong public broadcast like the BBC, which gave fair and accurate information about what's going on in the country, it might not matter, because people just now live in their little information bubbles. You can ban Russian channels, people can still watch them very easily. It doesn't really work, censorship. So we now have a different challenge, and it's not just in Ukraine, it's across the world, of what do you do when the population of your country doesn't follow one media anymore. They follow little sort of fractured mini-realities. A lot of people say this is actually the end of states as we know it, because states were only possible when you had a couple of TV channels, a few newspapers, which grouped a common identity. But that's a very theoretical question. So Ukraine's challenge, and especially in Odesa where we are now, where there are 44 different channels, where people in the oblast don't even watch TV anymore because they don't trust anyone, only trust what other people tell them, only get their news through social media because they don't trust anyone. What do you do with that? And that will mean a completely new type of strategic communication, where instead of broadcasting down to people, you have to talk to them and try to involve them in what you're doing and really listen to their needs. So I know somewhere in Bessarabia now, they're setting up these tiny little radio stations with local people, literally a radio station of one person. But that's more trusted than anything that gets broadcast from Kiev. So Ukraine is really at the avant-garde of challenges that we face everywhere. I mean, just look at what's going on in America with, the followers of Trump live in a separate reality, And America isn't under attack from another country, but let's say, another country were to just tap into those viewers, what would Washington do? You can't reach them anymore.
Mr. Pomerantsev, now that we've gone to the more global context of this information security and information policy, obviously this issue has a global outreach because, first of all, again, if we're talking about Russia, Russia is not only targeting its propaganda towards Ukrainians, but also towards the Western countries as well, the entire Europe, and also ISIS. Take a look at the ISIS. Their message is being targeted at various people across the countries. And even if we take a look at the most recent horrific attacks in Brussels and Paris, these were the homegrown terrorists. So what do the countries need to do now globally to protect themselves from this information, massive stream of information? How do they control this information?
Well, exactly. I think it would be disastrous.
Is it possible at all?
Well, first, I think it would be disastrous if they started thinking in terms of information security. I just think that's a disastrous idea. That'll lead to, that's how the Russians and the Chinese think. That's a disaster. We have to have an open information space with a competition of ideas, and the best ones should win. What you're talking about is the use of information in military operations. That's something completely different. That's the use of information, while you're invading Ukraine. Then, if you're in a military situation, I suppose a certain amount of censorship is quite normal. But if we start talking in terms of information security, they've won and we've lost, basically. So I'd be very cautious about this idea. I think it's a very bad intellectual concept.
How do the countries protect themselves from the terrorists?
Through existing legislation about incitement to violence, hate speech. You talk about that, not about information security. That's an absurd idea. That's what the Russians and Chinese talk about. Ban everything because it's a threat to what the hell is information security? What are you talking about? There's security full stop. In which case, if ISIS is using Twitter to organize a terrorist attack, obviously you shut down that Twitter account. They're trying to kill someone. You don't be stupid. But the idea of information security, I think, is a deeply authoritarian idea and one I hope we can consign to the worst pages of the 20th century.
If we can go back to the information war between Russia and the West, how do you see the West, the response of the Western countries towards that propaganda?
Well, listen, Russia just plays on existing problems. I mean, Russia doesn't have a sort of an alternative ideology like they did in Soviet times. So they just have, they see far-right nationalists rising, so they feed that.
Because some of the experts say that the main goal of the Russian propaganda is to create confusion. It's not important for them whether the message which they're trying to deliver is accepted, it reaches the audience. The most important thing for them is to create confusion. People stop realizing what's happening. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, completely. The idea is not so much to prove that we're right, but that everybody's wrong. I mean, a very good example, when Putin lies openly about soldiers being in Crimea, it's almost as if he wants the West to say, hey, you're lying, so you can go, hey, you lie too. We're all the same. Everyone lies. There's no difference. And when there's no difference, when there's no objectivity, when there's no right or wrong, then why can't you invade Crimea? Who really cares? So yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And that's actually a very deep philosophical attack. It's not just tactical, let's spray out a million conspiracy theories. It's let's really do this sort of like attack on sort of the fundamentals of trust and dialogue, which are necessary for democracy. So that's exactly what they're doing. And the problem is there's more and more of that anyway. They're going with the flow. There is less and less trust in media. There is more and more confusion. There is more and more conspiracy theories out there. So Russia this is the really frightening thing. They're really going with the flow of developments in the world. And it's partly to do with globalization. So people have, due to the changes in the world, people have lost trust in the media or the institutions they used to trust. It's partly to do with the nature of new information. There's so much information out there that people are confused. They can't tell right from wrong, misinformation from real information, and then the Russians add to that mix. So it's something to do with the nature of information. And if we think about the consequences, it's very frightening. Democracy is based on the idea that we can have a debate about the facts, about here's the truth, and we talk about what's the best way to take it forward.
But then nobody knows.
Yeah, but if nobody knows what the truth is, then you can't
Yeah.
have a debate. So actually, that really undermines the sort of the epistemological basis upon which democracy exists. And Russia is just helping it along. I mean, it sees this is going on, and it's doing everything it can to aid that process.
Yeah, looks like some very complicated situation here. Mr. Pomerantsev, thank you for finding the time to come and talk to us. Really appreciate that. We were discussing the information security and information war with the senior fellow of Legatum Institute, Mr. Peter Pomerantsev. I'm Vladimir Rasulhu. Thank you for watching Ukraine Today.